In this episode, we react to the report that the U.S. national debt is now bigger than the whole U.S. economy. Hello, welcome to the Call Like I See It podcast. I'm James Keys, and joining me today is a man whose takes are sharp because he gets to the point ASAP. Tunde Ogunlana. Tunde, are you ready to show him why you remain an urban legend, even though you're actually suburban now?
Yeah, let's just have a show. I don't know if I'm going to respond to that. So,
no, before we get started, I feel proud that I got you on that one. I got you.
You did. And I got my chocolate lab sleeping at my floor, at my feet here. And I'm looking out at my lawn that is already, the grass is getting too long and it's pissing me off. So yes, I am suburban as they come. I'm that guy.
Yes. Now, before we get started, if you enjoy the show, I ask that you subscribe and like the show on YouTube or your podcast app. Doing so really helps the show out. We're recording on May 12th, 2026. And Tunde, reports have started coming in that the U.S. national debt now exceeds the size of the U.S. economy and measured as gross domestic product. And this is the first time this has happened since 1946, which was right after World War II. And now in another life, we used to hear about the national debt and having that was bad and how we needed to care about this stuff. And that was when the debt was a much smaller number and much, much smaller percentage relative to GDP. So was that all BS? Is there a point where the national debt of the United States actually will matter? Or are we still just playing around with monopoly money and these milestones are just kind of like, oh yeah, okay, it's greater than GDP. Okay, how much more money do we want to borrow? And just keep going.
Should I clutch my pearls now, or is that something I should, or I got to buy some pearls first?
But I was gonna say you should have came here with the pearls.
Yeah, no, I thought about that joke as you were talking. I was like, oh yeah, there was a time like 15 years ago where everybody was clutching their pearls about the debt and the deficit and all these things. And you're right. And somehow
we just keep borrowing.
Yeah. So I think to answer you directly, it's like a yes and yes. I think it's important. And yeah, I do think there's a lot of people that were full of BS as related to their concerns over the debt. Now, in fairness, there are a lot of people that weren't full of BS that they still are concerned today. And those people to me would tend to be the ones. Like, it's interesting to see who cares and who doesn't by 2026 compared to, let's say, 2016 or 2006, right?
But look at it. I like where you're going, but let me ask you more poignantly or more specifically. I want to look at something. Was the fact that they were raising the concerns when the debt was so much smaller? The debt has grown so much since then. So were their concerns back then necessarily BS? Because they were warning about all this stuff and it's 10 times worse now, or not 10 times literally, but maybe twice as worse now. And everything's still chugging along.
I don't really know, man, because I think that some of this is we're building the plane while we're flying from an economic standpoint. And by that, I'll mean, and then I'll hand it back for your thoughts is, when what we're basing these assumptions on about national debts and all that are looking at economies from kind of the more of the true industrial age, when economies ran on more physical things like processing plants and being able to ship commodities from here to there. What I'm seeing even now
with monetary system that was based on a currency that was based on something,
correct. And that's what I was just going to go there. Like with the advent of crypto, like the show we did just in recent weeks about the poly market. And I was amazed to learn that that's already a $1.1 trillion economy. The fact that data, remember, surpassed oil as the number one traded commodity in the world back in like 2018. So I don't know, maybe we can just keep creating new ways of economic growth and activity that maybe deficits don't matter. I don't know. And I think we're going to find out one way or another in probably the next 5 to 10 years.
Well, here's the thing, man. I think that it matters, but it doesn't matter in the way that we think. And this is why it's interesting that you brought up the people that were raising the alarm, particularly the people that were trying to score political points with it. Is that I think it matters from the standpoint of confidence. And so, there's a raw numbers piece that we'll talk about once debt service, grows higher and higher and higher. But I'm setting that part aside right now because that's still a single digit kind of thing. But in terms of percentages, but I think it matters from the psychological standpoint. Do people feel good, whether it be people in the country, people outside of the country? What do they feel like? Okay, things are working, things are okay. So actually, when it was being used for political points, it mattered at that time because it was being used to undermine a lot of people's faith in their country, or in their government, and the ability to do stuff. And so it mattered then. It matters less right now, relatively, because nobody's out banging the drum from a policy, a political point standpoint. Hey, our platform stands on reducing the debt, or the debt is a problem, and yada yada yada. Whether that's something that they hold a true belief or not, because nobody's talking about it a lot, it doesn't really affect the confidence people have in the government. So it can just go up, and it's like, well, from an objective standpoint, it looks like this should matter more. But because less people are talking about it, and less people are clutching pearls about it, even if they're only clutching pearls for the purpose of winning political battles or winning political skirmishes, the fact that they're not doing that anymore makes it more palatable. So it to me, that's crazy in that sense. And some of that comes back to the idea again, like I kind of threw in when you were talking. If your currency, for example, is standardized to gold, then when you have a certain level of debt, then conceivably that could create a real problem with your ability to manipulate your currency and to utilize your currency. When your currency is based on confidence, which ours is, the US currency is based on confidence, then it's like it matters more if people are talking about it, and it matters less if people aren't talking about it. So to me, that's the fascinating thing about this, is that basically it's like a self-fulfilling thing, one way or the other, up to a certain point. I mean, we're going to talk about this because I do want to get to and I mentioned it already. Like, is there a point when this actually does start to matter? Like for real, like not just in people's minds.
Yeah, and I know we'll discuss that. I just want to follow real quick because you make a very good point. How do people feel internally about the country? And I think there's a symbiotic relationship between this, because as we've, like you said, some people, not to make this conversation about politics, but some people in the last 20 years have used this as a political weapon that has then got us to a point where we as a nation are behaving in a way. And my concern is this, because you're right, it's about confidence, it's about vibes. I think there's a lot of things that go into this that aren't as much as the things that we think of, like you're saying about this wonky, financial statistics and about, it's a very good point you make, that because our currency is decoupled from gold.
It must have been a really good point, because that's the third time you said that. I'm feeling really good over here.
Yeah. No, have confidence. This is very good.
Yes,
it's as if I had made good points when we did this show about supplements, because that's not my area of expertise. It's like, this is economics is where I'm at. And so you're making some very good points here. And so the point is that because the idea of confidence is also, like, the street term I would use would be vibes. Right? Like, if the vibes are good and people feel good, they do stuff they rock with you. And if the vibes aren't good, people don't want to rock with you. And so my concern also for this conversation is, because who knows how far the United States can go with the GDP of 30 trillion and being the world's largest economy and all that. With that, we probably can go a lot further than maybe nations like Zimbabwe in the 90s, or somewhere like Weimar Germany in the 30s, right? Which was already in a depression state and all that before Hitler came to power. So I think we are a lot stronger than we tell ourselves, right? To your point about how people have been manipulated internally to feel negative about their own system and their own country in many different ways, this being one of them. But then I think that now that we are behaving a certain way on the world stage, think about the last year and a half. We have told the Prime Minister of Canada that he's the governor. We have threatened multiple times the Europeans to invade and take over Greenland. We have, threatened South Africa that they're committing a genocide and they better play ball with us with whatever we want them to do. And so what I'm saying is, when you have this kind of attitude, and that's, James, I'm really big on the idea of soft power for the United States. And when you lose the kind of respect and the soft power side of it, you may put yourself in a position that the next time we have a great financial crisis like '08, and we need to do a TARP, or the next time we have a pandemic like in 2020, and we need to do a CARES Act, and we need to now print $7 trillion like we did worth of money at 0%, and we're asking our foreign allies and friends to buy the debt so that we can operate, they may not be as willing to do it. And that's my concern as well as the vibes.
Bingo.
You know what I mean?
That's the point.
That's it.
That's the
And
point when
so,
it matters. And so that's the key
yeah,
piece on this is that the problem, the underlying problem that we have right now is that we're accumulating all this debt while we're also saying that things are going like at least, the people watching the stock market and all of that, they're pointing, hey, look at the Dow, all that stuff. They're saying the economy's going great. So if the economy's going great, then why are we going increasingly more and more into debt? So that's the big problem because when the economy's going great, we should be reloading for the next crisis. And so when this debt, this out of control debt, when that will matter, it's reflective of an underlying problem, which we'll touch on in a little bit. But when it will really matter is when we haven't reloaded our systems to be able to absorb another tragedy. When something goes wrong, as long as things are going great, then we can absorb all this stuff. But as soon as something goes wrong, then it will undermine our ability to do that. And when will people start to care? Well, people start to care when that starts affecting their day-to-day because the GDP can be whatever it wants. The national debt can be whatever it wants. It's inflation. People will get up. As we know, when inflation starts acting up, then people are like, yo, what is going on? And that kind of stuff, that can influence the inflation. So we're going to see at a certain point, like you said, we're going to find out. And the problem is that these kind of things that can come up are unforeseeable by definition. They're unforeseeable. Yeah. So that's what we're going to end up dealing with. I say all that though, like this is still we're talking about it, but we recognize this isn't actually harming us in a huge way right now. Yes, the debt service, it's a big deal. It's bigger than the military budget. So it's a big deal, but it's not something that people feel on a day-to-day basis. Do you think there's something too, though? Because there's a lot that seems to be slow-moving crises around. It's like, oh, yeah, climate change. Oh, yeah, plastic pollution. Oh, yeah, all these things that it's like, yeah, like we can see that they're there, but it's not like COVID where it's like, hey, man, don't leave the house. So do you think that either our society or just humans in general, like, is there something about the idea of a slow-moving crisis that just makes us ill-equipped? Forget our system. Are we just ill-equipped to deal with slow-moving crises, or are we? Is it really is just about the system we have right now?
Your last one is where I'm going to land. It's us humans. It's
empty Tunde today.
Yeah, no, definitely glass half empty Tunde. I think we're at a point, and this is interesting. I'm going to say some kind of big, for me, esoteric galaxy brain BS, which is because I think you're right, James. There's so many things that we've seen that people have said they care about so much, and they have become the idea of something like a single issue voter comes to mind. And not to get pick on topics, it's just the idea, like, first of all, for the last few years, remember 2022, 2023, 2024, and we live in Florida, and we had a group called Moms for Liberty, right? That was so worried about protecting kids and all this stuff. And then since 2025, 26, Justice Department releases some files about documented, 1,200 girls getting, hurt by groups of powerful people. And it's interesting that the same people that were hand-wringing back then don't seem to be as vocal. I mean, some of them are, but a lot of them aren't. Same with the debt, same with climate, same with whatever, right? So I think that we're running up against the reality that as human beings, and this is where I'm going to go with, this is why I think we are kind of doomed to probably collapse all this at some point. Because we have evolved in nature, and so there's certain evolutionary realities that we just have, and that's things like tribalism, and maybe a large societies of humans with billions of people on the earth can survive in other type of societies than, let's say, a representative government, or if you want to call it a democratic republic or a full democracy. I like the imagination of what those can look like, but I don't know with our communication networks, the internet, the inability to have a shared narrative as a society. I think that is very difficult for us. And then I think, things I've learned about just how humans are. Like, the one reason why I feel like many of us feel like we're not agreeing is because the way that the internet is and algorithms have siloed us into different camps, in a sense, different tribes. And evolutionary biology has taught us that, like with the show we did about beliefs recently, beliefs aren't truths. And humans evolved to be part of a group. That is the most important thing, because to be outside of the group in the wild meant you don't survive. So people will do things like deal with cognitive dissonance and things that they
Well,
say
yeah,
they
the
agreed with
connection
and
that
say
you're
they
saying
didn't.
is that people
Yeah,
will adjust their beliefs to fit in with the group that they feel like.
correct. Yeah,
So what's actually real or true becomes less important than believing what the group says that we're going to believe in.
correct. And so what's happening, and I'm not saying that because I'm right and I'm trying to say people who don't agree with me are wrong. What I'm saying is I don't know who's right and who's wrong, including myself. But what I do know is that the fact
That's
that
a pretty
it's
flimsy
not
way to
like,
live.
well, well, don't look at my everyday life. You won't find out the result of that attitude. But I'm thinking about James because I'm old enough now to remember sitting down in front of the news, the TV, and and watching the news with my mom in the 1980s, and it was Peter Jennings and Tom Brokaw, and it was still back in the day when 80% of America got the same message. Again, whether it was true or not. And so we didn't have this type of disruption in our society based on people being triggered by things that they feel are very important. But then there's another 20% of the society that doesn't even understand what they feel because they're being told something else is totally important. And so
Yeah.
that's why I'm not here to pick on an ideology. I just think I don't know if this can survive with the modern, communication.
I don't think it's our humanity at all. Like, I think that this is about societal values. And so our society, and when I say this United States, it's a society, like I'll say, for example, capitalism. Capitalism has benefits to it. Capitalism has drawbacks to it as well. Capitalism focuses on prioritize short-term gains over long-term benefit. Period. That's what it does. Because that's the way it works. You got the capital, it requires that short-term gain to you to even make it to the long term. There is no long term if there's no short term. When you want long-term projects, historically, when we wanted to do a space race, it was the government working on that. It wasn't private companies working on that because they can't say in 1960, hey, we'll deliver the outcome in 1969. They wouldn't make it till 1969. So capitalism is something that underlines a lot of our values, and that's internalized profits, externalized costs. Short term versus long term. Those are ethos within the capitalist kind of values mindset that will, and it comes to building a huge corporation or establishing great technological innovation, those things can be very helpful. But when it comes to, if those values exit out of kind of that sandbox and go into a more of a worldview sandbox, then that creates a situation where it's like, well, hey, I don't care if things are going to fall apart in 10 years. I got to maximize my profit this next quarter or this next year. And so I think it's actually our societal values. Longer term societies approach situations and more longer term cultural views view things differently. I know when I was young, now this was overstated, I believe, but people talk about, oh yeah, the Japanese culture in terms of saving money, different things like that, things that were like, when I learned about it, I was like, oh wow, that's completely foreign to me. So I think, and remember, this actually does go back to Sapiens when we talked about this, is that one of humans' greatest advantage over animals generally, non-human animals, is our ability for cultural evolution. Like, we don't need biological evolution to adjust how large numbers of people operate. All we need is for cultural evolution, which can happen quickly and can take in a lot of different directions. So our culture has evolved in a way, I believe, that does not allow us to address things from a long-term standpoint because so much of the winning has been done by the short-term thinkers. And so therefore, those short-term thinkers have taken over basically and in terms of how we're going to operate totally as a society, which is understandable because our cultural values have made it so they've been the big winners, generally speaking.
No, it's like I agree with your last point, which is why I think I'm glass half empty because I just think that these guys, the people that wanted to dismantle things like the New Deal and the system that gave this country the largest middle class and a great economy, like post 1965, once it became a full democracy and everyone could participate, incling women. Right.
But remember, those people saw that as chaos. They looked at,
I know, that's what I mean. So the fact that they have won and they have reascended their acolytes into power. And I don't mean this just with the administration. I mean, in the Supreme Court, states, legislatures, all that we have a very undemocratic ethos now in our political leadership means that it's going to be very difficult for the people who want to see the United States be where it was from, let's say, 19 mid 1930s to, let's say, the 1990s or something, whatever people feel like are the golden era for the middle class. That's going to be a lot of heavy lifting, like people did in the 60s. And it's going to take violence. And I don't even want to talk about the 60s. We've talked about also the history of labor rights in this country, and the fact that mercenaries were hired by the gilded class in the 19 teens and 1920s to go put down people that just wanted to unionize in coal mines, or people that didn't want their 8-year-old kid being forced to go work in a mine, and they wanted that kid to go to school and have a public school in their town. Like, these are things that didn't just organically spring up after the Declaration of Independence was announced. These are things that Americans fought and died for 100 years, from the early settling of the country to the early 20th century. And I think we just have basically given that all away in the last decade or two. And, we're going to find out what it looks
giving
like.
it all away to Cheers, even,
Yeah.
I know that.
Are we going to quote my famous friend Padme LeBerry?
I know I can always get you if I throw a
from Revenge of the Sith and Star Wars that we have elected. We have lost the Republic to thunderous applause, electing.
I can get you going.
The Supreme Chancellor who becomes an emperor.
Yeah, of course. Well, let me throw one more thing at you. Yeah. And this is actually one of your lines. Leadership is important. And you mentioned earlier single issue voters, and so I want to tell you, that single issue voters are another one of the problems, so to speak, that we have, because what we end up, a single issue voter, what they're doing, what they're saying basically is that I value blank over anything, and that anything can be integrity, can be honesty, can be just being a decent person, So a single issue voter conceivably will vote for the devil if the devil promises them, I will do blank for you, which is kind of how deals with the devil work, So some of this is the move away from, and I don't know if this is that little knowledge is dangerous kind of thing, but the move away from, hey, let's try to find the most quality people that we can have. Let's try to find people with integrity. Let's try to find someone like a George Washington, who can voluntarily walk away from power that people are trying to throw to him. Let's try to find someone like a Lincoln. Let's try to find someone like an FDR who is born to the wealth class and doesn't need any of that, but is like, okay, hey, I'm going to save the wealthy people from themselves. I don't know that we're even looking for people like that anymore, because we have a lot of people who look at single issue like, hey, just give me this one thing. I don't care if you're the devil. I will do a deal with the devil in order to get this one issue that I feel so strongly about to the forefront. And so I think, and again, that may be the idea of little knowledge, you have a little knowledge being dangerous. It's like, okay, I think that everything in the country will be okay if we can just do this one thing. Or it may be the thing of being able to be fixated on one issue. I don't know what that is, but I do know that, as Tunde Ogunlana says, leadership is important. And if we've gotten bad at selecting leaders because we got too many people selecting leaders based on deals with the devil, then I think that also will undermine our ability to address big picture problems. Because it's like, well, if you don't have people of integrity, of vision in office, if they're just in there because they made a bunch of deals with people, then it's like, well, hey, they're just going to take care of themselves. That's kind of the person you wanted in the office, is somebody to just take care of themselves.
Well, I'll say this.
Wrap us up, man.
Yeah. And in fairness, just to finish on two direct things you said, in fairness to the American voters, many of them, there was a man who at least rhetorically behaved a bit like FDR in 2016, who ran for president because he said, I'm a billionaire and I don't need these people's money. Now, he ended up being a confidence man who misdirected a lot of people that supported him. But what I'm saying is, I don't blame those voters back then. People that showed up in 24 are still supporting him. I can maybe look different. But in 16, that was a message that a lot of Americans actually genuinely believed, but clearly it didn't play out that way. But we're getting back to the bigger issue of the single issue voter, because I thought of this actually in preparation. That's why I just want to finish my thoughts on this.
Hey, man, you claiming credit for my take?
Yes. So it was already in my head. You just allowed me to, get it out there. So yes, I'll claim credit. Let me steal it from you in front of everybody listening, man. Let me just, it's mine. Let's go. So, no, but no, because it's some. So here's what I thought, James. In America, in our culture, I'm sure other cultures have their single issue equivalent voters on different topics, but ours seems to be, in our lifetime, me and you, is Second Amendment, right? Guns and abortion, right? Pro-life people. They always will say, that's all I care about. And that's what we're seeing, right? In exchange for the Dobbs decision in 2022, a lot of people don't care that a president got a plane from an Arab country, right? Like that funded Hamas. And all these cognitive dissonance, again, things that people will have to square in their head. And so what I'm waiting for is, because this is where the people don't recognize the power they have. What if every American voter, instead of worrying about left versus right and Democrat, Republican, most people seem to say a simple topic. They don't like Congress having the ability to trade stocks on inside knowledge. Somehow, we as American people don't put it on ourselves to say, I'm a single issue voter for that. I want to test everybody running for Congress in this midterm. When you get in office, are you going to vote against insider trading and some of this corruption we see internally in our government? Because if you don't get my vote. I don't care about the other topics.
But here's the problem with that. And I know we got to get out of here. I'm just saying,
if we did hold our politicians to that type of thing, like some people hold them for abortion and guns, we might have a change in some of this.
Well, but what I'm saying, though, is that this is where, to your earlier point, we have a systemic problem, because with only two parties, what you're talking about is an issue that both parties tolerate or embrace once they're in office. Like, you can't say, I'm going to vote, for this party because of this, or I'm going to vote for that party because of this, because both of them do it. And both of them are in cahoots to not stop doing it. So that's where the people can't be represented in that context, because it's like, if you're not voting for anybody who does that, you just may not be voting, because that is an issue right now that the people in this is where, again, we get into this public servant thing. The people who are drawn to government right now aren't the people who are interested in public service, in large part. Not all the time. There are some that are there for public service, but they kind of stand out. You see the Bernie Sanders of the world. It's like, he looks like a crazy person half the time, because he's so much different than all these other guys that are stuff in their pockets. So it's he
also never met a comb. That's why he looks crazy. Let's be honest.
And then on that,
that's part of it.
We can wrap this episode.
He looks like a curmudgeon, man. He needs some PR help.
Hey, I'm gonna turn your mic off, man.
You could end the show in an eloquent way if you want, but we could end it too like this.
Yeah, we're ending it like that. We appreciate everybody for joining us on this episode of All Like I See It. Subscribe to the podcast, rate it, review it, tell us what you think, send it to a friend. Till next time, I'm James Keys.
I'm Tunde Ogunlana.
All right, we'll talk soon.